In this video, we will look at the types of hormone and explain the mechanism of hormone action that involve gene activation and second messenger or cyclic AMP. In the previous chapter, we have looked at how hormone is produced in the pancreas, travel in the bloodstream to reach the target organ or tissue. Pancreas and also pituitary gland are in the endocrine system, mainly for homeostasis. If there are any imbalance in the body, this endocrine system will release hormone so that the target cells able to act its response. This is also known as coordination. There are three types of hormones: protein or peptides based, steroids, and amines. Protein are water-soluble but lipid-insoluble. Because they are lipid-insoluble, they only able to bind to the receptor on the plasma membrane on the surface of the cell because they are unable to enter the cell. Example for protein hormones can be glucagon, ADH, oxytocin, and so on. For steroids, they are lipid-soluble but water-insoluble, mostly derived from cholesterol. Because they are lipid-soluble, steroids hormone able to enter the cell through the phospholipid bilayer. And amines. Amines are amino acid derivatives. Some of them are water-soluble and some are lipid-soluble. Thus, amines hormone able to bind to the surface of the receptor or enter the cell. For the mechanism of hormone action, for gene activation, this will involve gene or DNA. That's why the hormone need to diffuse into the cell to go to the target gene. So, this we will have steroid hormones as the example. For cyclic AMP activation or CAMP activation, it is hormone protein that is insoluble in lipid, thus they cannot enter the cell. So they will activate the protein on the surface of the cell. The first mechanism we have is the gene activation. Based on the name, we know that this will activate the gene or the DNA. We have the steroid hormones and the receptor protein in the cytoplasm of the target cell. The steroid will diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer because it is lipid soluble and bind with the receptor protein, forming hormone receptor complex. Then the complex will diffuse into the nucleus through the nuclear pore and bind to the DNA at a specific target gene. This will lead to the transcription of the specific gene to produce mRNA. Then the mRNA will diffuse out from the nucleus through the nuclear pore and undergo translation, where it will produce a specific protein or enzyme based on the gene. Then the specific protein will produce the specific response or effect to the hormonal signal. The second mechanism is cyclic AMP activation or CAMP activation. Here we have the hormone that is peptide hormone, receptor protein. Receptor protein compared to the previous gene activation, our receptor protein in CAMP activation reside on the plasma membrane of the target cell. We also have G protein and adenylyl cyclase. The peptide hormone will bind to the receptor protein. Because the peptide hormone is insoluble to lipid, means that they are unable to diffuse into the cell, so they will bind to the surface of the target cell, forming hormone receptor complex. So we have the hormone as our first messenger. Then, the hormone receptor complex will bind with the G protein and activate the G protein with the binding of GTP. The activated G protein will bind with the adenylyl cyclase and stimulate the catalysis of ATP into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP is our second messenger. Our second messenger will then activate protein kinase, where the protein kinase will phosphorylate other protein in a cascade event. This event will lead to either inhibit other proteins or stimulate other protein for catalysis in the target cell. And that is cyclic AMP activation.